89 years. Let that number sit in your chest for a moment, the way I've had to let it sit in mine. I was born in a house without electricity, in a town so small it didn't merit a dot on most maps. I have watched the world transform itself 3 or 4 times over, watched it shed its skin like something ancient and restless. I have buried a wife. I have buried a son. I have buried 2 brothers, a sister, and more friends than I can count on both hands twice. I have held the hands of dying people, and I have sat alone at kitchen tables at 3 in the morning, with nothing but darkness and the low hum of a refrigerator for company. And after all of that, after 89 years of living and losing and watching and wondering, I have arrived at a place of such extraordinary clarity that it almost makes me laugh. Because the things I can see now, standing this close to the exit, I could never see when I was standing where you are standing. So I'm going to tell you what I see. Not because I want your pity or your admiration, not because I have any particular wisdom that you couldn't find somewhere else if you were paying attention, but because nobody told me. Nobody pulled me aside when I was 34 and running headlong into my own life and said, "Slow down, you fool. You are squandering the only thing you actually own." I had to learn everything the hard way. You don't have to. I want to tell you about a man named Corvus. Corvus was not my closest friend. That distinction belonged to someone else, someone I'll get to. But he was the man I admired most in my 40s. He was the kind of man who walked into a room and subtly rearranged the gravitational field of it. People leaned toward him without realizing they were doing it. He had a quality I can only describe as concentrated aliveness. He paid attention to things. He noticed the precise shade of light on a Wednesday afternoon in November. He could describe the smell of rain on dry concrete with the accuracy of a poet and the enthusiasm of a child. Corvus used to say that most people were sleepwalking through their own existence. He said it gently, without cruelty, the way a doctor might deliver a diagnosis. He believed, with a fervor that bordered on religious, that the act of paying attention was the highest form of respect you could pay to the world. And then, slowly, the way these things always happen slowly enough that you miss the exact moment of change, Corvus stopped paying attention. It happened over the course of about 3 years, starting when he was promoted to a position at his firm that required him to travel constantly. He began moving through airports the way water moves through pipes, efficiently, mechanically, without any awareness of the journey itself. He ate meals on his phone. He called his daughter Thessaly on birthdays and let the calls drift into pleasantries. He bought a beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood and spent approximately 40 days a year inside it. I saw him at a mutual friend's gathering. I believe it was the autumn of 1987, and I barely recognized him. Not physically, he looked fine, but there was something missing from behind his eyes. The lights were on, but the voltage had dropped dramatically. I asked him how he was, and he said, "Busy, really busy, but it's good, it's all good, things are moving." And I nodded because, what do you say to that? What do you say when someone has confused motion with progress and pressure with purpose? Corvus died at 61, pancreatic cancer, swift and merciless. In the final weeks, when they had moved him to a facility and the days had contracted into small, manageable units of morphine and quiet, he said something to me that I have carried ever since. He said, "I spent 30 years building a life I never had time to live in." 30 years. Building a house he never sat in. Earning a silence he couldn't enjoy. And the worst part, the part that keeps me awake sometimes, even now, is that he knew it. He was paying attention again at the end. He could see it all with devastating precision. But precision at the end is just a different kind of grief. Don't be Corvus. Don't wake up in the last chapter and finally understand what the book was about. Now let me say something uncomfortable about your relationship with your own reflection. You have constructed an elaborate performance of yourself. You know exactly how to present yourself in photographs, in meetings, in conversations with people whose opinions you have assigned enormous and mostly fictional importance. You curate, you calibrate, you adjust your laugh and your language and your opinions based on the particular audience in front of you. And you have been doing this for so long that sometimes, I suspect, you genuinely can't locate yourself underneath all the layers of performance. I understand this. I did it too. For most of my 50s, I was obsessed with a version of myself that existed primarily in the minds of other people. I needed the people in my profession to regard me as formidable. I needed my neighbors to observe my circumstances and arrive at flattering conclusions. I spent money I should have kept to project an image that required constant, expensive maintenance. I argued positions I didn't fully believe because reversing them publicly felt like too great a humiliation. Do you know what happened when I eventually stopped doing all of that? When I finally, in my early 60s, simply ran out of energy for the performance. Nothing happened. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. The people who had seemed so menacing in my imagination, the ones whose invisible judgment I had been managing so frantically, were far too busy managing the invisible judgment of their own imaginary audiences to spend a single moment evaluating mine. The entire architecture of my self-consciousness turned out to be a theater with no audience. I had been performing to an empty house for decades. The years I spent worrying about what people thought of me are among the most wasted years of my life. Not because self-awareness is unimportant, it isn't, but because the particular brand of self-consciousness I'm describing has nothing to do with self-awareness. It is its precise opposite. It is a kind of sophisticated blindness. You become so focused on how you appear that you lose all access to how you actually are. At 89, I can tell you with absolute confidence, nobody is keeping score. Nobody is maintaining a careful ledger of your stumbles and your awkward moments and your failed attempts. The world is not a courtroom, and you are not on trial. You are a person moving through time on a planet moving through space, and the whole magnificent thing is happening so fast that the only crime would be to spend it terrified of your own shadow. Kill the performance. Find out who you actually are. You might be surprised. I was. There was a woman in my life named Isolde. She was my wife for 41 years. She died 11 years ago, and I think about her every single day. Not with the dramatic anguish of fresh grief, but with the steady warmth of someone sitting near a fire that will be with them always. Isolde was not a complicated woman, in the ways that people usually mean when they call someone uncomplicated. She was not simple, or incurious, or dull. She was uncomplicated in the sense that she knew what she wanted from her days, and she went about getting it without a lot of the noise that the rest of us generate around the basic business of living. She wanted good conversation and strong coffee, and her garden, and her grandchildren, and books, and music, and long walks in weather that most people would call inhospitable. She wanted me to put my phone, and later my various devices, down and look at her when she was talking. That last one I was not always good at. I think about all the evenings I was physically present, but mentally somewhere else. I think about the dinners where I ate her food and answered her questions in monosyllables, because my mind was still in the office, still turning over some problem that would resolve itself anyway, with or without my obsessive attention. I think about the weekend mornings I cut short because I had convinced myself that the work couldn't wait. Work that, in retrospect, could absolutely have waited, because it always waited, because the work is endless and the weekends are finite, and I had that equation exactly backwards for most of my adult life. The thing nobody tells you about the people you love is that your presence is the gift. Not the presents, the presence. Not the grand gestures and the anniversary trips and the jewelry selected with anxious precision. Those things are lovely, but they are not the point. The point is the ordinary Tuesday evening. The point is the cup of tea made without being asked. The point is putting down whatever you're holding and simply being in the same room in a way that communicates, "You are the most interesting thing in my field of vision, and everything else can wait." I was good at this sometimes. I was terrible at it for long stretches. And I would give a great deal, not that I have a great deal left to give, to go back and redistribute my attention more generously across the 41 years I had. You still have time to distribute yours wisely. Please do it. Please don't wait for the loss to teach you what the presence was worth. Here is something I have never heard anyone say at a funeral. I wish he'd spent more time at the office. I have been to so many funerals that I have lost count, and across all of them, across all the eulogies and graveside remarks and hushed conversations in church halls over bad coffee and good sandwiches, I have never once heard a person remembered primarily for their professional achievements in a way that made the room feel anything other than slightly sad. The careers get mentioned, of course they do, but they are mentioned the way you mention the weather from a particular afternoon, as context, not as content, as the backdrop, not the story. What fills the rooms at funerals is the specific, the idiosyncratic, the irreplaceable texture of a particular person who moved through the world in a way that nobody else moved through it. The neighbor who showed up with tools without being asked. The father who did the voice for every character in every bedtime story. The friend who called on no occasion whatsoever, just to say she'd been thinking about you. Those are the things that make people weep with something that isn't entirely grief. That particular cocktail of sorrow and gratitude, and the fierce, retroactive love you feel for someone you can no longer tell. Your career is not going to make anyone weep like that. Your title, your compensation, your performance reviews, your industry recognition, these things will not be in the room. They will be archived somewhere, if they are preserved at all, in documents that nobody reads and databases that nobody searches. But the quality of your attention, the warmth of your presence, the specific and unrepeatable way you loved the people in your orbit, that will be in the room. That will be in the room for as long as anyone who knew you is still breathing. Build that. Invest in that. Give your best hours to that. I want to tell you about a particular Wednesday morning in, I believe it was 1973. I was 40 years old. I had been traveling for 3 consecutive weeks, and I arrived home on a Tuesday night after midnight, moving through my own house like a ghost, trying not to wake anyone. I slept badly. And in the morning, before anyone else was up, I went downstairs and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table in the early light. My youngest son, Absalom, came downstairs about 20 minutes later. He was 7. He was wearing pajamas with small airplanes on them, and his hair was doing something extraordinary in several directions simultaneously. He didn't say anything. He just climbed up onto the chair beside me and leaned against my arm and looked out the window at the backyard with me. We sat like that for maybe half an hour, just the two of us and the coffee and the morning light coming through the window and the sound of birds doing whatever birds do at that hour. He fell back asleep against my shoulder at some point. I didn't move. I held completely still, the way you hold still when something rare has landed near you and you don't want to frighten it away. I have closed significant deals. I have been in rooms where important decisions were made. I have had the kind of professional experiences that my younger self would have found impressively consequential. And that Wednesday morning in 1973, holding still so I wouldn't wake my sleeping 7-year-old, is among the finest experiences of my entire 89 years. Not because anything happened, because nothing happened. Because for once, I was not trying to make something happen. I was simply there, fully, completely, uncomplicatedly there. You will have your version of that Wednesday morning. Many versions, probably. Small windows of ordinary grace that open and then close. I am asking you as urgently as I know how to ask anything. Be there for them. Not with one eye on your device and your mind already in the next hour. Actually there. All the way there. Because those are the moments that your 89-year-old self will return to again and again when most everything else has faded. Let me give you the short version of everything I have learned, because I am 89 and I tire more easily than I used to, and I want to make sure I've said the essential things before I run out of words. Let go of the outcome. You are spending tremendous energy trying to control things that are not controllable. The future does not belong to you. It doesn't belong to anyone. What belongs to you is the quality of your engagement with this present moment, this conversation, this meal, this morning, Put your energy there. Tell people what they mean to you before you need to, before it becomes urgent, before you're standing at a graveside rehearsing the things you should have said on an ordinary afternoon 6 years ago. Call the person. Say the thing. Awkwardness is survivable. Regret has a much longer half-life. Choose your suffering. You are going to suffer. This is not pessimism. It is the plainest possible statement of biological fact. The question is not whether you will suffer, but whether the suffering will mean something. Suffering in service of something you genuinely love and believe in is an entirely different animal from suffering in service of other people's expectations or your own unexamined fears. Be intentional about what you are willing to bleed for. Stop treating rest as failure. Your culture has developed a profoundly confused relationship with stillness. You treat exhaustion as a badge of worth and idleness as a character flaw. I have watched this idea hollow out good people, drain the color from them, the humor from them, the capacity for joy from them. And I want you to understand, the willingness to rest, to be quiet, to do nothing of measurable value for a period of time, is not weakness. It is wisdom. It is, in fact, the precondition for everything else that matters. And finally, don't wait. Whatever it is, the conversation, the trip, the apology, the experiment, the declaration, the beginning, don't file it under later. Later is a country whose borders close without notice and whose visa requirements are stricter than anyone tells you in advance. Later is where dreams go to become regrets. The only territory you actually occupy is now. Make something of it. I am going to end where I started, 89 years. There is a strange gift in the long view, in having lived long enough to see how things actually turn out, rather than how you imagined they would. The long view does not make you wise automatically. Plenty of old people are simply old, their foolishness merely more weathered than it used to be. But if you have been paying attention, if you have been willing to be wrong and corrected and changed, the years accumulate into something that feels, at moments, very close to understanding. What I understand at the end of my 89 years is this. The love was the point. It was always the love. Not the romantic variety exclusively, though that too, God willing, that too, but the larger love. The love of being genuinely interested in other people. The love of showing up. The love of noticing beauty and refusing to become too sophisticated or too busy to be stopped by it. The love of a Wednesday morning in winter light. The love of a child's specific and irreplaceable laugh. The love of a conversation that goes somewhere neither person expected. That is the only fortune that accumulates, the only one you take with you when you go, the only one that, in some form I don't fully understand, but have somehow come to trust, continues after you. Everything else is furniture. Everything else is noise. You have so much time still, far more than you feel, far less than you think. Use it with your whole chest. Use it without apology. Use it on the things and the people that actually matter to you, not the things you've been told should matter. Not the prizes and the validations and the carefully curated evidence of a life well performed. I am 89 years old. I have said my piece. Now go and live yours.